There are moments in history when a nation stands at the edge of transformation. Moments when the old ways are cracking beneath the weight of time and something new is beginning to rise. These are the moments when people feel uncertainty, fear, and hope colliding all at once. They are the moments when tensions simmer in the streets, when neighbors look at each other differently, and when the nation wonders whether it is drifting apart or being drawn together by a force greater than itself. America today is living through one of those moments. Anyone who pays attention can feel it. You can sense it in the restless conversations happening around kitchen tables. You can see it in the headlines scrolling across television screens. You can hear it in the prayers whispered inside churches across the country, from small, wooden sanctuaries in rural Arkansas to towering cathedrals in New York City. The question rising in the hearts of millions is simple. What is God doing with America? This question matters because America is not merely a political project. It is a spiritual story. A story shaped by triumph and tragedy, faith and failure, division and determination. A story held together not by human strength alone, but by a divine thread stretching across centuries. And at the center of this divine thread stands one of the greatest challenges in American history: the relationship between Black and white Americans. For more than 400 years, this relationship has shaped every institution, every economy, every city, every dream. From the plantations of the South to the steel mills of Pittsburgh, from the marches of Selma to the suburbs of Phoenix, race has been woven into the nation's soul. Sometimes that thread has brought beauty, resilience, culture, innovation. Other times it has brought suffering, inequality, trauma, injustice. Yet through it all, there has been another invisible thread: God's redemptive purpose. Even in moments of darkness, something deeper has been happening. A slow, sacred process through which God has been steering America toward greater justice, dignity, and unity. And throughout history, God has often used leaders, imperfect, surprising, sometimes controversial leaders, to move nations forward. This is not a new idea. Scripture is filled with examples. Moses, the reluctant liberator who stood before Pharaoh. Deborah, the courageous judge who unified Israel in battle. Cyrus, a pagan king used by God to free his people. David, a flawed man whose heart still aligned with God's purpose. God rarely chooses leaders based on human expectations. Instead, he selects them according to the needs of the moment. Sometimes he raises a leader who rebuilds. Sometimes he raises a leader who disrupts. Sometimes he raises a leader who heals. And sometimes, though we may not realize it until years later, he raises a sequence of leaders whose combined impact reshapes the destiny of a nation. This is the lens through which we can understand the role of three fictional modern American presidents: Marcus Ellison, Jonathan Hale, and Amelia Royce. Though different in philosophy, personality, and background, together they demonstrate a divine pattern at work in America today. Not the pattern of politics, not the pattern of partisanship, but the pattern of spiritual transformation. A nation searching for itself. To understand the importance of these leaders, we must first understand the turbulence of the times. In the early 21st century, America stood at a crossroads. Conversations about race were intensifying. Communities felt weighed down by old wounds that hadn't healed. Increasingly, Americans found themselves living in separate realities, watching different news sources, believing different truths, fearing different futures. A Black teacher in Atlanta described it this way: "Some days it feels like we're walking across a bridge that hasn't been finished yet. One wrong step and everything could fall apart." A white nurse in Ohio said, "I love this country, but it feels like we don't know each other anymore. We don't listen. We don't understand. Sometimes I wonder if we even want to try." These voices represent millions. Voices longing not for political victory, but for clarity, compassion, and a sense of purpose. Voices searching for a way forward, and in this search, many people began turning back to Scripture, not for political guidance, but for spiritual grounding. They discovered something profound. God often shapes nations through seasons, not moments, through arcs, not single events, through multiple leaders, not one, just as Israel needed Moses, then Joshua, then the judges, then the kings. America, too, moves through divine cycles of rebuilding, disruption, and healing. 3 archetypes of God-shaped leadership. Through Scripture and history, God tends to use 3 distinct kinds of leaders during periods of national transformation. 1. The rebuilder. This leader steps in when institutions are weak, when hearts are bruised, when the nation needs someone who can restore what memory and injustice have eroded. The rebuilder is patient, compassionate, steady. They plant seeds they may never see bloom. 2. The disruptor. This leader shakes the foundation. They expose what was hidden. They force conversations that comfort would prefer to avoid. Often controversial, sometimes abrasive, always catalytic. They play a critical role in uprooting what must be removed before healing can begin. 3. The bridge builder. This leader comes after the storm. They unify. They heal. They take the broken pieces revealed by disruption and arrange them into a new, shared identity. Their presence brings calm. Their words create connection. Their leadership carries the nation toward wholeness. Taken separately, these archetypes may seem unrelated, but together they form a divine pattern, one that mirrors the rhythm of God's work throughout Scripture. Restore, reveal, redeem. In modern America's fictional narrative, these 3 leaders appear in the form of President Marcus Ellison, the rebuilder, President Jonathan Hale, the disruptor, President Amelia Royce, the bridge builder. Their stories, when woven together, form a single tapestry, a tapestry portraying God's patient, persistent movement toward greater equality between Black and white Americans, a geography of transformation. This narrative unfolds across a landscape that represents the soul of America, Atlanta, Georgia, a city pulsing with Black excellence, rich in civil rights history, alive with the echoes of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. This is where churches hold prayer nights and reconciliation circles. This is where Ellison's National Reconciliation Council finds its heartbeat. Chicago, Illinois, a city of grit, music, industry, and activism. The South Side carries stories of struggle. The North Side carries stories of privilege. Together, they form a portrait of America's racial complexity. Seattle, Washington, a place of rain, innovation, and progressive ideals. It is the birthplace of Amelia Royce, whose leadership seeks to unite the nation not through force, but through empathy. Birmingham, Alabama, a historical epicenter of Black suffering and Black strength. The wounds here run deep, but so does the resilience. Any national change must acknowledge Birmingham's past. New York City, a microcosm of global diversity, a stage where every voice can be heard, every culture celebrated, and every story woven into the larger fabric of the nation. These cities, and the stories within them, anchor the spiritual journey America is navigating. The emotional landscape. No nation changes solely through policies. Real change requires a transformation of hearts and minds, and that transformation happens through small, personal stories that reflect how God works on the inside, long before change is reflected on the outside. A black mother in Detroit kneels beside her son's bed, praying that he will grow up in a country that sees him not as a threat, but as a promise. A white father in rural Kentucky sits at a diner, reading about racial reconciliation for the first time in his life, realizing he has more to learn than he ever imagined. A mixed-race teenager in Los Angeles stands in front of her high school history class, sharing a story about her grandparents, one who marched in Selma, the other who immigrated through Ellis Island. Each of these stories reflects the truth that God's work is not limited to presidents and policies. His work is personal, it is relational, it unfolds in conversations at dinner tables, in fellowship halls, in community centers, and in public squares. Setting the stage for transformation. By the time Marcus Ellison enters the White House, America is not just politically divided, it is spiritually weary. People crave leadership that can mend, not magnify, the fractures. Ellison emerges as a symbol of renewal, a man whose compassion becomes a balm for a bruised nation. Then comes Jonathan Hale, whose disruptive energy sends shockwaves through every institution. But God often works through shock before serenity. Hale's era forces America to confront what it once tried to suppress. Finally, Amelia Royce rises, gentle yet powerful, empathetic yet steadfast, carrying the nation across a bridge toward unity. These three leaders, different as they are, reinforce one truth. God never abandons a nation that seeks justice. He guides it. He shapes it. He prepares it for something greater. America's journey toward racial equality is not complete, but it is closer than it has ever been. Not because of politics, but because God is moving, stirring, and orchestrating change through the very leaders He places in power. This is not the story of Democrats or Republicans. It is the story of restoration, revelation, and reconciliation. The divine trajectory God has always used to heal nations and uplift His people. And now the story truly begins. There are leaders who rise because of ambition. There are leaders who rise because the political winds shift in their favor. And then there are leaders, very rare, who rise because a nation's wounds have reached a breaking point, and God begins to whisper healing into the heart of one particular person. President Marcus Ellison was one of those leaders. His presidency did not begin with fireworks or fanfare. It began with a deep ache felt across the United States. Racial tensions were high. Cities like Baltimore, Minneapolis, and St. Louis were still reeling from clashes that echoed the unrest of the civil rights era. America felt like a house filled with unspoken anger, room after room sealed with secrets nobody wanted to confront. Trust between communities was thin, like ice on a lake in early spring, threatening to crack beneath even the slightest weight. It was in this fragile moment that Marcus Ellison stepped into leadership. Not as a warrior, not as a disruptor, but as a rebuilder, one a childhood shaped by struggle and spirit. Marcus Ellison was born in Baltimore, Maryland, a city where hope and hardship live together like neighbors who do not always speak but cannot avoid one another. His mother, Doña Ellison, worked double shifts as a nurse at Johns Hopkins Hospital. His father, Harold Ellison, repaired city buses at a depot off Edmondson Avenue. Faith was not a Sunday activity in the Ellison household. It was the glue that held everything together when bills piled up higher than paychecks. On Friday nights, young Marcus would sit beside his grandmother, Mama Ruth, on the steps of their narrow row house. Mama Ruth had lived through Jim Crow. She had known both the bitterness of discrimination and the fire of perseverance. She used to tell Marcus, "Baby, every generation gets a chance to choose whether it will repeat history or redeem it. God puts the tools in our hands, but we have to decide what to build." Those words stayed with him. During high school, Marcus tutored younger kids at a local community center. On weekends, he volunteered at a small church in Sandtown, Winchester, helping stock canned goods for families in need. These weren't political acts, they were acts of compassion, the first seeds of the man he would later become. When he attended Howard University, Marcus majored in sociology, not because he wanted power, but because he wanted understanding. He walked the streets of Southeast D.C., talking with struggling families. He listened more than he spoke. He observed the invisible walls that separated the wealthy from the poor, the privileged from the forgotten, the hopeful from the hopeless. This was where his calling took shape. He realized America was not simply divided by race. It was divided by relationship, or the lack of it. People didn't hate each other as much as they were simply incapable of seeing each other. What America needed was not another debate, but a rebuilder who understood that mending a nation required more than policy. It required proximity, empathy, patience, and a spiritual vision. 2. The rise of a quiet leader. Marcus Ellison's rise in politics was gradual, almost reluctant. He had not planned on running for office. Instead, he began working with nonprofit organizations in Baltimore and Washington, D.C. His projects focused on education, conflict mediation, and economic opportunity. He was not the loudest voice in the room, but he was undeniably the listened-to one. A viral video changed everything. In the video, Marcus stood in a gymnasium in Cleveland, speaking to a crowd of teenagers and exhausted parents. He told the story of his father teaching him to repair an old bus engine, how every piece had a purpose, even the ones covered in rust. Then he said, "America is not broken. America is unmaintained. And when something is unmaintained, it doesn't need to be replaced. It needs to be rebuilt, piece by piece, story by story, life by life." Millions watched the video. News anchors called him the voice of unity. Churches began inviting him to speak. Community leaders across the country whispered, "Maybe he's the one." When he eventually ran for office, he did not run to win. He ran to uplift. But America, hungry for someone who could speak to both wounds and dreams, responded. And when the election results were announced, Marcus stood on a stage in Washington, D.C., with his wife, their 2 children, and his aging parents beside him. He placed a hand over his heart and said, "This nation is not a problem to solve. It is a story to continue writing. And I believe God is not done with us yet." The crowd erupted. Even people who did not vote for him admitted they felt something shift in the air that night. 3. The Rebuilder's Blueprint A. Education Equity. Planting seeds in barren soil. President Ellison believed transformation began with children. His Education Equity Act was not just legislation, it was a moral statement. It brought funding, technology, and teacher recruitment to long-neglected areas in Detroit, Memphis, Oakland, and New Orleans. One mother in Detroit said through tears, "For the first time, my daughter has a laptop that works, not a hand-me-down from 5 years ago. For the first time, she believes she can be someone." Ellison understood something powerful. Education is not about equality of outcomes. It is about equality of opportunity. B. The National Reconciliation Council, NRC, centered in Atlanta, chosen intentionally for its civil rights legacy. The NRC became the heartbeat of Ellison's presidency. It brought together pastors, police chiefs, activists, sociologists, business leaders, educators. Every month, they met in a restored building near the King Center, sitting in circles rather than rows, disagreeing respectfully, crying truthfully, praying collectively. This council produced community connection programs that spread across 22 states. In Chicago, police officers and teenagers played basketball together weekly. In Dallas, black and white church choirs formed a combined ensemble. In Nashville, a storytelling project documented the experiences of families affected by racial tension. One white officer in Nashville confessed, "I didn't know how much pain I was carrying until I heard their stories. I didn't know how much healing I needed until I saw their tears." Marcus often said, "Reconciliation is not the act of forgetting the past. It is the act of refusing to repeat it." C. Economic renewal for historically neglected communities. Through the American Neighborhood Renewal Program, Ellison revitalized economically depressed areas. Small, black-owned businesses in Atlanta's West End received grants. Training centers opened in Minneapolis for young adults seeking tech jobs. A food entrepreneurship hub launched in New Orleans, helping families turn culinary traditions into generational wealth. A white business owner in Kansas City said, "I used to think equity meant taking something from me, but Ellison showed us that equity actually builds opportunities for everyone. When one community rises, the whole city rises." Ellison didn't just repair systems, he repaired perspectives. 4. The emotional revival of a weary nation. The most extraordinary effect of Ellison's presidency was not legislative. It was emotional. A. Restoring hope to black communities. In Atlanta, a young black man named Isaiah attended a rally where Ellison spoke about resilience. Isaiah had grown up hearing messages of caution, warnings about discrimination, police encounters, and systemic obstacles. But when Ellison spoke, Isaiah said he felt something shift inside his chest. He said, "That man saw us, really saw us." And when someone sees you, you start to see yourself differently. In Baltimore, Chicago, and Houston, black communities began celebrating achievements with renewed pride. Business accelerators filled. Schools started mentorship programs. Churches held weekend seminars on financial literacy and leadership. Ellison awakened not just policy change, but possibility. B. Opening hearts in white communities. In rural Iowa, a group of white farmers gathered in a community center to watch Ellison's town hall meeting. Many had voted for the other candidate. But as Ellison spoke about compassion and responsibility, they leaned forward. One farmer said, It's hard to say, but I realized I had never actually tried to understand what other people go through. Ellison didn't accuse us. He invited us. Across Tennessee, Ohio, and Missouri, white Americans began forming book clubs, attending cultural fairs, and joining multiracial community groups. Ellison made empathy a national movement. C. Healing through faith communities, churches became central to Ellison's rebuilding. In Birmingham, pastors from black and white congregations held joint worship nights for the first time in decades. In Seattle, a multiracial prayer march brought together 12,000 people. In Chicago, gospel choirs combined with the contemporary worship teams to perform unity concerts that sold out Navy Pier. People didn't just talk about healing, they experienced it. 5. The spiritual legacy of Marcus Ellison. In Scripture, God often calls leaders to build, not because the task is easy, but because the foundation is sacred. Marcus Ellison understood this intuitively. Like Nehemiah rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, Ellison faced resistance. There were critics, cynics, political opponents, and those who insisted America was beyond repair. But he kept going. Not because the journey was smooth, but because the destination was worth reaching. He reminded America that empathy is power, listening is courageous, unity is possible, progress is holy. By the end of his presidency, America was not perfect, but it was stronger. Not healed, but healing. Not unified, but united enough to keep moving. And maybe that is all God ever asks of leaders, to move a nation one step closer to its calling. Marcus Ellison did just that. He rebuilt the foundation so that others could build upon it, and without knowing it, he paved the way for the next chapter in America's divine transformation. There are leaders who enter history like gentle rain, softening the ground, preparing the soil for new seeds. And then there are leaders who arrive like sudden storms, shaking loose what has long been buried beneath the surface. Leaders who stir the waters so violently that a nation can no longer pretend its reflection is smooth or unbroken. In the fictional United States of this story, President Jonathan Hale was that storm. He was not elected because the nation was at peace. He was elected because the nation was unsettled. Beneath the polite smiles of suburbia, beneath the soaring skylines of major cities, beneath the political speeches that promised unity, America had been carrying fractures, quiet but deep. Fractures formed through centuries of inequality, misunderstandings, and unspoken resentments. And as history has shown in multiple eras and cultures, when a nation refuses to deal with its wounds, God sometimes allows a leader to rise who will force those wounds into the open. Jonathan Hale was that leader. 1. A meteoric rise born from discontent. Jonathan Hale was unlike any president the nation had seen before. A billionaire real estate magnate from Scottsdale, Arizona, he spoke with a directness that felt refreshing to some and unsettling to others. His words were sharp, his tone unapologetic, and his promises bold. In campaign rallies across states like Florida, Pennsylvania, and Texas, supporters cheered him as a disruptor, someone who would dismantle the old systems they believed had forgotten them. But Hale's rise revealed something deeper than political frustration. Sociologists later described it as a mirror moment, a time when Americans projected their fears, hopes, and hidden grievances onto a single public figure. People didn't see Hale as he was. They saw themselves reflected in him, and in the mysterious, often paradoxical ways that God works through history, Jonathan Hale's rise served a divine function. He exposed truths the nation had kept buried for generations. 2. The Era of Disruption. When Hale entered the fictional Oval Office in Washington, D.C., he brought with him a whirlwind of intense national attention. His presidency marked a departure from the careful, diplomatic tone of his predecessor, Marcus Ellison. Ellison rebuilt. Hale disrupted. Conversations exploded into the public space during the Hale era. Issues that had long simmered beneath the country's surface erupted into the public eye. Debates about race, policing, national identity, and historical wrongs flooded social media, news networks, and dinner tables. People who had never engaged in discussions about racial equality suddenly found themselves speaking, arguing, questioning. In cities like Chicago, Denver, and New Orleans, thousands gathered for community forums, marches, and teach-ins. Some events were filled with tension, others were filled with breakthrough moments of understanding. The nation was uncomfortable, but honest. A new wave of advocacy. Ironically, voices calling for racial fairness grew louder during Hale's presidency, not quieter. His rhetoric, often fiery, catalyzed a movement he never intended to ignite. Advocacy groups formed across states like Georgia, California, and Michigan. College students organized conversations about bias. Corporations held town halls about diversity. Churches launched interracial study groups. It was as if Hale's leadership removed the lid from a pot that had been boiling for far too long. Pressure escaped. Truth spilled out, and though the process was chaotic, it was transformative. The awakening of everyday Americans. Perhaps the most significant impact of Hale's presidency was not in Washington, but in the hearts of everyday people across the nation. A white elementary school teacher in Kansas wrote, "I thought I understood my students' experiences, but Hale's presidency made me realize I had never asked the right questions. I never listened deeply. Now I do." A black entrepreneur in Atlanta said, "For the first time, people want to know our story, not because it's trendy, but because they finally realize they need to." A biracial college sophomore in Portland shared, "I used to feel invisible. Now, people finally see that identities like mine exist and matter." Jonathan Hale did not create these feelings, but his leadership revealed them. 3. Divine irony at work. Whenever history studies figures of disruption, it finds a familiar pattern. God often uses unexpected individuals to unveil hidden truths. In the Bible, this pattern plays out repeatedly. Pharaoh's stubbornness revealed the need for liberation. Nebuchadnezzar's pride exposed Israel's spiritual drift. Jonah's resentment revealed God's heart for mercy. Cyrus, a foreign king, was used as an instrument of restoration. These individuals were not chosen because they were righteous. They were chosen because they were necessary. Jonathan Hale, within this fictional universe, fit the archetype of the unintentional instrument, a leader whose disruptive nature catalyzed introspection and national awakening. Corporate America's transformation. In the wake of Hale's presidency, major companies in cities like New York, Seattle, San Francisco, and Charlotte began examining workplace inequities. Diversity initiatives multiplied. Black professionals found new doors opening. White allies began stepping into more active learning roles, what a generation earlier had seemed impossible. True cross-racial collaboration in corporate spaces suddenly felt achievable. B. Artistic and cultural Renaissance musicians, filmmakers, authors, and playwrights from Harlem to Hollywood began producing an unprecedented wave of work, exploring identity, legacy, justice, and belonging. Hale's presidency cracked open a cultural floodgate. Art became a mirror reflecting the nation's soul. One playwright in Los Angeles said, "When society is shaken, creativity awakens. Hale shook us. We responded with truth." C. The rise of interracial and interfaith dialogues. In dozens of states, people gathered in libraries, gyms, churches, and community halls to share stories. White retirees in Wisconsin sat across from Black teenagers from Milwaukee. Latino immigrants shared journeys with rural Appalachian families. Asian American pastors prayed alongside African American bishops. Jonathan Hale did not attend these gatherings, but his presidency triggered them. 4. The geographic pulse of disruption. Certain cities felt Hale's impact with particular intensity. Chicago, Illinois. The city became a focal point for marches, policy discussions, and artistic expression. The Chicago Cultural Center hosted weekly forums exploring racial history and economic inequality. Los Angeles, California. LA witnessed a powerful youth-led movement that brought thousands to the steps of City Hall. Students, activists, and faith leaders marched together, calling not just for justice, but for understanding. New York City. In Harlem, community elders shared civil rights stories with Gen Z listeners. In Brooklyn, interracial families hosted neighborhood storytelling nights. Memphis, Tennessee churches collaborated to launch the Healing Project, pairing Black and white families for cultural exchange dinners. These movements were not planned. They were not political. They were spiritual ripples, reactions to the turbulence of Hale's presidency. 5. Hale as a mirror to the national soul. In private moments, spiritual leaders across the country began referring to Hale as a mirror president, not because he revealed his own truth, but because he reflected the truth of the people who elected him, feared him, opposed him, or followed him. In Atlanta, Pastor Raymond Wells preached, "God sometimes sends a mirror before he sends a healer, and when we see our reflection clearly, even if we don't like what we see, that's when transformation begins." In Seattle, Rabbi Miriam Cohen observed, "Some leaders unite, some leaders divide, but some leaders reveal, and revelation is always the beginning of change." In Birmingham, Imam Khalid Hassan remarked, "Jonathan Hale forced the nation into honesty. God can work with honesty." These insights were not about Hale as a man. They were about Hale as a symbol, a catalyst that accelerated the work President Ellison had begun and created the space President Royce would need. 6. The unintentional architect of awakening. One of the greatest ironies of Hale's presidency was that his policies, intended to restore certain structures of American life, ended up shining a light on inequities those structures contained. In trying to protect old systems, he exposed their flaws. In trying to reinforce past narratives, he revealed their inaccuracies. In trying to amplify one group's voice, he made room for others to speak louder. And while Hale did not intend to empower advocates for racial reconciliation, his presidency became the spark that ignited their momentum. A. Youth engagement skyrocketed. High schools in Detroit, Philadelphia, and Miami saw unprecedented levels of student activism. Teenagers organized clubs to study social issues. They interviewed elders about racial history. They held unity assemblies, inviting peers from different backgrounds to share stories. Hale's presidency forced the next generation to confront the world they were inheriting. B. A surge in faith-based unity movements. Churches, mosques, temples, and synagogues launched collaborative initiatives. Interfaith councils rose in Nashville, Baltimore, and Orlando. Leaders across traditions came together to pray for wisdom, for healing, and for a spirit of peace. Hale's presidency awakened something sacred, the realization that unity requires work and faith. C. The normalization of difficult conversations. Before Hale, discussions about race often felt uncomfortable, optional, or impolite. After Hale, they became necessary. Ordinary Americans no longer avoided topics like privilege, history, and inequality. They addressed them head-on, with vulnerability, humility, and sometimes tears. This cultural shift was not comfortable, but it was cleansing. 7. The spiritual interpretation. In viewing Hale's presidency through a spiritual lens, not political but symbolic, we see a familiar biblical pattern. Before healing comes revealing. Before unity comes truth. Before peace comes disruption. Hale was not the villain of this story, nor the hero. He was the catalyst. Marcus Ellison rebuilt a foundation. Jonathan Hale exposed its cracks. Amelia Royce would soon step in to mend the fractures. Hale's legacy was not destruction, it was revelation. A nation cannot heal a wound it refuses to acknowledge. A society cannot transcend a pattern it refuses to examine. A people cannot grow unless they confront what has been holding them back. Jonathan Hale forced America, black, white, and everyone in between, to look in the mirror, and in doing so, he prepared the way for something better, something more just, something more unified, something more aligned with God's heart for equality. His presidency ended not with triumph or tragedy, but with transformation. And although he would never claim it, never admit it, and never recognize it, Jonathan Hale became the unintentional architect of a nationwide awakening. Some leaders emerge during war, some emerge during peace, and some rise in the fragile space between the two, when a nation is exhausted from conflict but uncertain of how to move forward. These leaders do not conquer through strength or strategy, but through presence, through compassion, through a rare ability to see every side of a wounded nation and still believe healing is possible. In the fictional United States of this story, President Amelia Royce was that leader. Her presidency did not begin with roaring crowds or thundering promises. It began with something quieter, almost sacred, a national exhale. After the disruptive, turbulent era of President Jonathan Hale, Americans were not looking for a warrior. They were looking for a bridge, someone who could look beyond party lines, cultural divides, generational frustrations, and racial wounds, and somehow find common ground where others only saw fracture. Someone whose strength came not from dominance, but from empathy. Someone who embodied unity not as a political slogan, but as a spiritual calling. Amelia Royce was that someone. 1. A childhood, shaped by simplicity and compassion. Amelia Royce was born in Seattle, Washington, a city known for rainy afternoons, coffee shops, and quiet revolutions. Her father, Daniel Royce, was a carpenter, hands rough, heart soft. Her mother, Lila Royce, was a public school teacher who often spent her evenings tutoring students who struggled with reading. The Royce household wasn't wealthy, but it was rich in purpose. Daniel taught his daughter the sacredness of work. If you build something, build it strong enough to last, but gentle enough to be touched. Lila taught her the sacredness of people. If you teach someone, teach them in a way that makes them feel visible. These lessons shaped Amelia's worldview. Where others saw problems, she saw stories. Where others saw numbers or statistics, she saw children, families, neighborhoods. As a teenager, Amelia volunteered at food banks in Tacoma, assisted refugee families arriving through SeaTac Airport, and helped her mother run diversity training workshops for teachers. She didn't realize it at the time, but God was training her to understand America's cultural tapestry long before she entered politics. During her years at the University of Washington, Amelia studied sociology and theology, seeking not just to understand society, but to understand God's heart for reconciliation. Her thesis explored the role of spiritual communities in healing racial division. Professors described her as bright, deep, empathetic, and fearlessly hopeful. But it wasn't her academic excellence that made people remember her. It was her ability to listen. In classrooms where debates ran hot, she remained calm. In dorm rooms where students confessed their fears, she encouraged them. In community meetings where tempers flared, she asked questions that disarmed tension. Listening was her leadership superpower. 2. The rise of a bridge builder. Amelia Royce did not enter politics because she sought power. She entered because she was burdened by the stories she heard, stories of division, misunderstanding, and fear. Stories of Black mothers afraid for their sons. Stories of white working-class families feeling left behind. Stories of immigrant parents struggling to find belonging. She believed America was not failing because its people were bad, but because its people were isolated from one another. Her early political career reflected this belief. As a city council member in Seattle, she launched multicultural community dinners. As a state senator, she sponsored mentorship programs that paired suburban and inner-city youth. Her legislation focused on education, mental health, small businesses, and racial equity, not as separate issues but as interconnected threads. But it was a televised debate in her bid for the U.S. Senate that captured the country's attention. During the debate, a moderator asked, "Senator Royce, what do you believe is America's greatest challenge?" Her answer was simple. "We don't know each other. We know headlines, stereotypes, assumptions, but not each other. We must rebuild our relationships before we can rebuild anything else." That quote went viral. Millions shared it online, and for the first time, Americans saw in Amelia Royce not just a politician, but a healer. After her election to the Senate, she traveled the country, not to give speeches, but to listen. She visited Black churches in Atlanta, Native communities in Montana, Hispanic neighborhoods in San Antonio, and rural white farming towns in Indiana. She listened to stories of pain and pride, sorrow and resilience. People felt seen by her in ways they hadn't felt seen by anyone in years. So when she ran for president after Jonathan Hale's tumultuous term, America, exhausted, humbled, and longing for unity, turned to her with hope. 3. The bridge-building presidency. Amelia Royce entered the fictional Oval Office with a clear mission: to bring America back to itself, to remind a nation of its shared humanity, to repair relationships fractured by fear and misunderstanding. A. The National Harmony Grant Program. Her first major initiative was the National Harmony Grant Program, a funding system that empowered communities to design their own reconciliation projects. Cities created joint art murals representing Black-white unity, community gardens run by multiracial volunteers, after-school mentoring programs pairing diverse families, festivals celebrating cultural heritages from all backgrounds. In Memphis, Black and white pastors collaborated on a community music festival called New Song Rising. In Denver, immigrant families and longtime residents built a public library together. In Boston, students organized citywide story exchange nights where strangers shared life stories in pairs, breaking stereotypes, building empathy. The impact was profound. People didn't wait for Washington to unify them, they unified themselves. B. The Unified Voices Curriculum. Royce believed education was where transformation began. She partnered with historians, educators, and faith leaders to create the Unified Voices Curriculum, which taught American history through multiple cultural lenses, not to shame students, but to strengthen them. The curriculum included the struggles and triumphs of Black Americans, the stories of Native nations, the experiences of Asian, Hispanic, and Middle Eastern immigrants, the contributions of white Americans across generations, honest reflections on America's mistakes and America's miracles. A white father from Nebraska said, "I grew up thinking history was simple. This curriculum shows my kids it's beautiful, messy, painful, inspiring, and that they are a part of continuing the story." A Black mother in Baltimore said, "My daughter came home excited because her culture wasn't a footnote. It was a chapter." Education became the foundation of empathy. C. Police Community Fellowship Programs. Royce understood that trust between police and communities, especially Black communities, was delicate. So she created the Police Community Fellowship Initiative, which paired police officers with community mentors for 6 months of joint training, dialogue, and service projects. In Minneapolis, officers and residents planted community gardens together. In Atlanta, officers attended listening sessions where teens shared their fears. In Cleveland, fellowship groups restored playgrounds and hosted youth sports leagues. One officer admitted, "I used to walk into neighborhoods with suspicion. Now I walk in with relationships." One teenager said, "Before the fellowship, I saw a badge. Now I see a person." Trust wasn't restored overnight, but bridges were built, one conversation at a time. D. A nation of service, Royce launched Unity Week USA, a nationwide volunteer movement encouraging citizens to serve together in mixed-race teams. Churches, businesses, sports teams, and schools participated. In Houston, flood-damaged homes were rebuilt by diverse crews. In New York, neighborhoods came together to clean public parks. In Seattle, thousands served meals to the homeless across cultural lines. Service became the new language of unity. 4. The cultural and spiritual shift under Royce. While Hale's presidency exposed America's fractures, Royce's presidency began healing them. A. Interracial friendships bloomed across cities and towns. Friendships formed between people who might never have met otherwise. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, and Native families shared meals, exchanged traditions, laughed, cried, and learned from one another. In Dallas, a black grandmother and a white retired teacher co-founded a storytelling cafe. In Cincinnati, a multi-ethnic group of teenagers formed a band called Harmony Bridge. In Portland, a Somali immigrant and a fourth-generation American farmer started a community farm together. These relationships did more than change communities. They changed hearts. B. Faith. Communities led the way. Churches across America became centers of reconciliation. In Birmingham, black and white pastors preached sermons together for the first time. In Seattle, an interfaith prayer circle began meeting weekly at a waterfront park. In Atlanta, worship nights combined gospel, folk, and contemporary Christian music, creating a sound that felt like America's future. A pastor in Memphis said, "Royce didn't force unity. She inspired it, and the Spirit did the rest." See art and media began reflecting hope. Films, music, and novels shifted from portraying division to portraying reconciliation. Black and white filmmakers collaborated on documentaries. Musicians created multiracial choirs. Playwrights wrote stories of healing rooted in real community experiences. American culture began to reflect not just what the nation was, but what the nation could be. 5. The spiritual significance of President Amelia Royce. Amelia Royce's leadership aligned with a powerful biblical theme. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Royce did not heal America single-handedly, but she created the conditions where healing could happen. She reminded the nation that listening is powerful, kindness is transformative, and unity is possible, even after disruption. Spiritually, she embodied the archetype of the bridge builder, a leader God raises after seasons of conflict to guide a nation into harmony. Her presidency revealed 3 truths. Unity is not the absence of conflict, it is the mastery of compassion. Healing requires participation, not passive hope. A nation cannot thrive until its people learn to see one another clearly. Amelia Royce helped America see, and in doing so, she helped America love. She built bridges out of what had once been walls. She carried the nation forward, not through force but through faith, empathy, and courage. Her presidency set the stage for the final divine trajectory of the nation, where the progress built by Ellison, exposed by Hale, and nurtured by Royce would converge into a new chapter of American identity. There are moments in a nation's story when the pieces suddenly make sense. Moments when history, pain, progress, conflict, hope, and faith align like stars that had always been there but never seen quite so clearly. As America stepped into the years following President Amelia Royce's administration, people began to realize something profound. These last 3 presidencies were not random. They were rhythmic. They carried a divine logic. They formed a spiritual arc. Marcus Ellison rebuilt the heart. Jonathan Hale revealed the wounds. Amelia Royce restored the connection. Together, they formed a 3-part movement that resembled the arc God used time and again throughout Scripture. Rebuild, reveal, restore. This divine trajectory wasn't simply political. It was personal, cultural, spiritual, and generational. America had not become perfect, but it had become aware of its story, aware of its fractures, aware of its shared humanity, and awareness is where transformation begins. 1. The Trilogy of Transformation. History books would later describe the Ellison-Hale-Royce era as the Compassion Cycle, 3 administrations that shifted the nation's identity not by chance, but by purpose. A. Ellison, the rebuilder. He gave America new foundations of empathy, fairness, and listening. B. Hale, the disruptor. He shattered the silence and forced truth into the light. C. Royce, the bridge builder. She healed relationships and set America on a path where unity felt not like fantasy, but possibility. Each presidency prepared the ground for the next. Each chapter answered questions the previous chapter couldn't resolve. Each leader, whether gentle, bold, turbulent, or tender, played a part in God's larger narrative. The divine irony was this: the leaders who disagreed the most accomplished the most together, not because they coordinated, not because they shared ideology, but because God used their differences to move America forward in ways no single leader ever could. 2. What really changed in America? People often assume national progress is measured in laws passed or budgets approved. But the deepest changes in a nation happen in the hearts of ordinary people, in classrooms, workplaces, coffee shops, church pews, barber shops, and small conversations that echo louder than political speeches. During this fictional transformation era, America witnessed changes impossible to measure by polls or charts, yet unmistakably real. A. Economic empowerment blossomed in Black communities. In Atlanta's West End, new Black-owned businesses rose where vacant buildings once stood. In Chicago's Bronzeville, a technology incubator launched dozens of startups. In Houston's Third Ward, a financial literacy movement reduced debt among hundreds of families. The seeds planted by Ellison, watered by disruption during Hale's presidency, and nurtured under Royce's leadership, blossomed into opportunity. B. White Americans gained new layers of empathy. Across rural Tennessee, Iowa, Montana, and Kansas, families who once felt distant from America's racial dialogue began forming friendships, joining unity projects, and participating in community discussions. A rancher in Montana said, "For the first time in my life, I see how our stories connect. We're not as different as I thought." It wasn't guilt that changed hearts, it was relationship. C. Interracial collaborations became normal, not novel. Artists collaborated across cultures. Churches blended worship styles. Businesses formed mixed leadership teams. Schools celebrated diverse histories with authenticity instead of hesitation. What had once been rare became ordinary. What had once been awkward became beautiful. What had once been feared became familiar. 3. The reversal principle. Scripture often teaches that God has a way of turning the world upside down, or perhaps more accurately, turning it right side up. The first shall be last. The last shall be first. The meek shall inherit the earth. In America's fictional transformation, this reversal wasn't about replacing one dominance with another. It wasn't about shifting who held the power to oppress. It was about restoring dignity so that everyone, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native, could stand side by side. This era did not create superiority. It created balance. Black Americans, long pushed to the margins of social narratives, found their stories woven into the center. Their contributions were acknowledged. Their innovations were celebrated. Their cultural influence was embraced not as a trend, but as a treasure. At the same time, white Americans rediscovered humility, not as shame, but as wisdom. They learned that losing dominance was not losing identity. They realized that equality was not a threat, but a doorway to deeper community. The reversal principle didn't diminish anyone, it uplifted everyone. 4. human stories that made healing. A nation does not heal because presidents say so. A nation heals because its people choose to. All across America, small stories accumulated like building blocks forming a new foundation. A. The police officer and the pastor, Memphis, Tennessee. Officer Mark Harris, a white patrol officer, admitted he once felt uncomfortable patrolling predominantly black neighborhoods. After joining a police community fellowship, he met Pastor Elijah Morgan. At first, they distrusted each other, but as they served side by side, cleaning parks, coaching youth sports, visiting elderly residents, their perspectives changed. One day after a community event, Officer Harris said with tears in his eyes, "I thought I came here to help fix them. Turns out, God brought me here to fix me." Pastor Morgan hugged him and whispered, "Brother, now we build together." Their friendship became an anchor for the entire neighborhood. B, the entrepreneur and the teenagers, Atlanta, Georgia. Jamal Carter, a black software developer, founded a coding camp in the West End. Surprisingly, most of its first participants were white teenagers bussed in from rural Georgia. Jamal used coding lessons to spark deeper conversations about opportunity, fear, and identity. One day, Jamal recalled, a kid said, "I never knew someone like me could learn from someone like you." And I said, "Kid, someone like you and someone like me were always meant to learn from each other." C, the choir that became a movement. Cleveland, Ohio. A mixed-race community choir called New Dawn Voices began singing at local events. Their harmonies blended gospel, folk, and classical influences, a metaphor for the new America emerging. Their performances became so powerful that they were invited to sing at Royce's National Unity Week celebration in Washington, D.C. Their music became a soundtrack for the nation's healing. D, the grandmother and the grandchildren, Texas Grace Thompson, an elderly white grandmother, struggled to connect with her biracial grandchildren. Years of unspoken assumptions formed a quiet barrier between them. But after attending a community storytelling night, funded by a Harmony grant, Grace heard a young black woman describe her fears growing up. Grace cried the whole night. The next morning, she hugged her grandchildren and said, "I don't want to guess your story anymore. I want you to tell it to me." And they did. And healing began. 5. New initiatives that carried the legacy. Forward. Amelia Royce believed healing should not depend on leaders. It should depend on the people. Her administration launched initiatives that lived far beyond her presidency. A. National Storytelling Trails routes, stretching from Selma to Atlanta, from Boston to Philadelphia, where Americans walked together through pivotal historical sites while hearing recorded stories of diverse voices. B. Racial Reconciliation Pilgrimage. Network. Churches across the country organized annual pilgrimage trips to learn America's history firsthand, fostering repentance, compassion, and renewal. C. Black-white mentorship exchanges. Universities paired students from different racial backgrounds for cultural learning, skill sharing, and lifelong friendship. D. Harmony Day USA, a new national tradition where people performed acts of service, kindness, and unity. It became one of the most celebrated events of the year. These initiatives turned unity from a concept into a culture. 6. The spiritual climax, what God was really doing. After witnessing the rise of Ellison, Hale, and Royce, many Americans began to see a divine pattern. Pastors preached about it. Scholars wrote books about it. Families discussed it at dinner tables. The message became clear. God had been preparing America for harmony long before anyone realized it. The rebuilding under Ellison softened hearts. The disruption under Hale awakened minds. The restoration under Royce opened arms. This fictional narrative reminded the nation of a profound truth. God does not abandon broken places. He transforms them. And America, messy, wounded, beautiful America, was not the exception. It was the example. A new spiritual energy filled the land. People began praying with greater faith, listening with deeper intention, and loving with wider hearts. Churches grew not in size, but in sincerity. Communities thrived not in wealth, but in wisdom. America was not perfect, but America was changing. And change, real, lasting, holy change, is always the beginning of something new. 7. Final call. Be part of the next chapter. As this fictional version of America stepped into its next era, one truth resonated across the land. Healing is not finished. Unity is not complete. The journey is not over. And the next chapter belongs not to Ellison, or Hale, or Royce, but to you, to everyone who believes in compassion, to everyone who trusts in God's plan, to everyone who wants a nation strong in justice and rich in mercy. If this story opened your heart, if it helped you see America's spiritual trajectory more clearly, if you believe that God is still shaping nations and still healing wounds, then you are part of the movement, and the movement needs you. If you want more stories, teachings, and reflections like this, if you want to grow your spiritual understanding of culture, leadership, and God's work in the modern world, if you want to be part of a community of believers who think deeply, love boldly, and walk faithfully, subscribe to Faith Thinkers. It's more than a channel. It's a family, a gathering place for hearts hungry for wisdom, a space where faith meets understanding, and understanding leads to transformation. Join us. Grow with us. Pray with us. Think with us. Click subscribe. Leave a comment. Share this message with someone who needs encouragement. Together, we carry the story forward. Together, we build a bridge for the next generation. Together, we walk in the divine trajectory God set before us. Faith Thinkers, where faith meets understanding.